Part 6 of a 7-part series. If it's your first time here, I'm really bad with remembering who is here and who is not here. I've just been here so many times. We've been going through a series on the 7 churches in Revelation. You find them in Revelation 2 to chapter 3 of the book of Revelation, and it's a really difficult book, if I'm being completely honest. I took a course on it, and it's so challenging. There's so much reading and so much thinking. I guess it's just a part of being in seminary and preparing for ministry. But I just want to say that this is a sermon series where it's relevant today. We look at the book of Revelation and we hear about these prophets who said back in September 24th that the rapture was coming. They disappeared, but we didn't, so I guess they got lucky. There's always a way to interpret Revelation, and there's a lot of thinking that goes into it. So thank you for putting up with my nerdiness and the many words that I bring in this. And so today we're looking at the church in Philadelphia. And I want to ask us a question before we go forward here. Have you ever wondered about your own faith, your own relationship with Jesus? Have you ever done what I like to call a faith audit? If you've done one of these faith audits, you've taken a look at what you do, what you don't do, who you are, and who you aren't. And if you're honest, if I'm honest when I do this, I will find that I have an intemperate heart. There can be anger, there can be lust, there can be a life living in unforgiveness. You do these things. Heck, you swear when you're cut off in traffic. That just shows where our hearts are. You might say that you don't do something. I don't give to the poor enough. I don't love my enemy. I don't report an injustice that I see in the workplace. At the very least, I don't even read my Bible every day. I don't tithe. I don't pray often enough. You can say that you are prideful, selfish, or that you aren't loving and as devoted to Jesus as you could be. These are all questions that come out of doing a faith audit. But I think they all come down to this one question that answers it for us. Are we really worshiping the one true God? Are we really doing enough? Are we really worshiping the living God? And for the Church of Philadelphia, we will find that they are being confronted with some similar sort of challenges to their faith. One group was claiming that they didn't worship Yahweh. They didn't worship the one true God. We find this church community also had way less to offer than the rest of the churches that we've looked at. And we also will find evidence that to worship Jesus Christ is actually to worship the one true God. And so this question of, do I worship the one true God, the one who created everything? Do I actually do that? The answer lies in whether we worship Jesus, because he is co-equal, co-eternal with the Father. Just fancy Nicene ways to, Nicene Creed we just read today, just to historically so the church has understood it. We'll find that when we worship Jesus Christ as the one true God, we also will find how he esteems his people, how he sees them, how he sees the trajectory of their future, no matter their strength. And so in our text today, I want to submit to you that we will see that Jesus provides assurance to the church in Philadelphia amid their persecution. And how I want to go about looking at this text, I want to work through this assurance by going through the 5 parts in our text. If you're taking notes, this is probably helpful. Take a look at first the introduction that Jesus makes, the introduction. Then we'll take a look at the Philadelphians. You could say the cheesesteaks if it's easier for you to spell. That's the Philadelphia cheesesteak. So you're supposed to laugh. I should have put that on the screen. Then we'll take a look at the synagogue. And we'll look at this tribulation. It's a big word. You've probably heard it on social media every now and again. And then lastly, we'll take a look at the temple. So first, this introduction. Second, the Philadelphians. Third, the synagogue. Fourth, the tribulation. And fifth, the temple. So before we get right into the text, let's take a look at the city of Philadelphia. And it's not the one where the 76ers play all right. Anyways, I'm not a Philadelphia fan in basketball. This is the city of brotherly love. It comes from the Greek word, philo and delphoi, two Greek words, brotherly love. That's what that word means. And there's a reason that this city, and not the one that was founded in the 1800s, this city is within the first 300 years, give or take year 0, 300 kind of years, give or take. And this name came from two brothers. They were kings. They were inheriting this kingdom from their father. The oldest brother got it. He was king, and his brother was kind of a second king. I don't know. I don't know the term for that in that era. But they were brothers, and this older brother went off to battle. And rumor had it, it turned out to be a rumor, that his brother died in battle. So the younger brother decided, okay, well, it was his turn to take the throne. That was the process back in the day. And what happened is his brother seemed to have come from the dead, but looked fine. The report was wrong. He didn't actually die. And so in that time, you would give up kingship over an entire nation. And that'd be a strange thing to do for you and your family, for your legacy. So traditionally, if that happened, that older brother would have actually died, gotten killed by the younger brother so he could keep his throne. But in this case, out of the love he had for his brother, he actually gave up his throne and gave it back. A very bizarre thing, but it was called the city of brotherly love, to love one's brother. That's where the name comes from, and this is before cheesesteaks, mediocre basketball teams, and Rocky Balboa. Very, very far in the past. In Philadelphia, they were about 20 miles from a volcano, so they had a real fertile land that was great for wine. You could have visited there, but we're a little late. They had so much wine production that Rome had to remove a bunch of vineyards so they could grow corn to make up for the lack of food. That's wild to me. That's like if we were to take a look at all these canola fields we have in Alberta and just like, you know what? We have too much canola. We don't have enough grazing cattle, so we have to remove about 500 hectares of canola fields in order to feed people more than deep fried food. Just to give you kind of a perspective on that. And in this setting, there was also a group of Jews who had called this place home. And this is important as we go through the text. We'll find it significant when we find Old Testament allusions. So the book of Revelation, if you don't read it with the Old Testament, you're going to be confused. Or you'll find a newspaper article that's like, well, that's obviously what we're talking about here. And so just as we have gone through the series, if there's one thing I would love for you to have picked up on, it's Old Testament, Jesus claiming to be God. Okay, let's get into this. And so this brings us into the first part of our text, the introduction. And so as I briefly mentioned, in the book of Revelation, John does this thing where he cites the Old Testament over 500 times but doesn't give it credit. He would die to plagiarism, and that he would just lose all of his marks to that. But he attributes characteristics given of the God of the Old Testament to Jesus. He just says, yep, same person, different being. That's how John does this. If you want to get a Faith Life Study Bible, you need to go to faithlife.com, get Faith Life Study Bible. They will show you this is an Old Testament reference to the God of the Old Testament found in the book of Revelation. And this sermon is exactly the same. We find these traits, that he is holy and true. This is the first characteristics made in this introduction. And so we read in the NIV that he is holy and true. And if you read the ESV, if you read that with me, you would notice that it says that these are the words of the Holy One, the True One. And so the Holy One title is found in several Old Testament texts referring to God. When you read through Isaiah, you will find this title, the full title, the Holy One of Israel, 25 times in that book alone. Or you might have heard this expression, I have seen the Holy One coming on the clouds of heaven. That's a reference in the book of Daniel. And in the book of Revelation, it is used frequently, all over the place. You probably couldn't find a page without Holy One or some reference of some sort like that. And this is significant because not only is this referring to the Holy One of Israel, this Yahweh, this is the Yahweh who is now incarnate in Jesus Christ. And so this is a big deal for these believers who are in a context where there's a Jewish synagogue who is obviously not. They've been called the synagogue of Satan. That's a pretty rough group. So next we find that he is called true. Yeah, and so the Greek word here can either mean true in the context of who is telling the truth. That person's telling the truth. They are being true to facts, right? It can also be used for trustworthy. That's a trustworthy person. I would trust them with everything I am and everything I have. If I needed someone to house sit for me, I'd let them go for it. If I needed them to babysit my daughter, they're trustworthy enough to do that. That's a fun conversation I had with my wife. We just had our first back in August, so it's hard to be here with someone. I know she's cooing at home and kicking around in her play gym. So that's anyways, trustworthy and true. It can mean both things in this context. You can pick one or the other, but you don't really need to. What this means is that only this Jesus is trustworthy. He's the only one worth placing trust in. And he's the true Messiah, which is a direct counter to the lie that the Philadelphian church was hearing from the local synagogue. We'll touch on that later. Next, we find that Jesus claims this. He holds the key of David. He holds the key of David. And now a key is not like the one I have too many of on my keychain today. Back in the ancient world, a key was actually probably bigger than Lisa's guitar. That's how big the key was. And it was a big bar. You had to get it right into a door, and only one person had it. There was no copies. It was exclusive access to the palace, so that it could be with the king. It could be, the palace and the temple were kind of interchangeable a little bit, so you could worship the Lord. There was this power that you would have, this authority. Ideally, you're not able to be hacked with your password online. You have that one key. It's just, if you have the space in your brain to remember every single one of them that you have, that's a lot of power. If you forget them, well, pass key is there to save your life, I guess. This key was huge. It was heavy. It was unique to that one door. So nobody else, without the permission of the person who held it, could have access. And so why would these Philadelphians care about this holy and true one and this key of David? This, again, Old Testament reference. This is a direct reference to Isaiah 22, verse 22. And one commentator tells the story like this. It's not so well-known Old Testament text. It's not a so well-known text that involves a person named Shebna, who held a position in the court of Hezekiah, king of Judah. He was no minor administrator, but a powerful person who controlled access to the king and the running of his administration, much like the White House chief of staff functions for an American president. Shebna reveals his vanity and selfish ambition by having a grave carved for himself out of solid rock and a prominent place among the tombs of Israel's kings. Shebna was not a king. Isaiah the prophet informed Shebna that God was greatly displeased with his arrogant act and was going to send him to a far country where he would have no need for his elaborate tomb and would die in disgrace. Isaiah also prophesied that God would depose Shebna from his prominent position and replace him with Eliakim, son of Hilkiah. So not only would God clothe Eliakim with the robe and sash of Shebna, but he would also give him an even more powerful symbol of his new authority, the key to the house of David. And they go on to say that the authority that Christ enjoys as the one who alone has the key of David is stressed by this phrase: what he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. In the original context, this refers to the absolute authority that Eliakim, the new master of the household, would wield to control access to the palace and the king. And in the context of Revelation 3, verse 7, our text today, this now refers to the absolute authority of Jesus, that Jesus, the true and trustworthy Messiah, possesses to control access to this city of my God, the New Jerusalem that we'll see later. That is the kingdom of God. And so these are impressive details. This is an impressive resume that Jesus makes of himself. This introduction shows that the words he is about to say are a big deal. But what benefit would this bring to these Philadelphians here? So let's move on to this second part, the Philadelphians. So they would hear this holy one, this true one, this trustworthy one, and hear that he has the key of David and this authority to open and close a door. What benefit would that bring to these people? So this idea of an open door connects directly to the idea of Jesus being the one who holds the key of David. This key was the only one person could have at a time, and this key would open the door to the temple. This would open to the presence of the king. And for these believers, the good news was that the opening of this door was not up to the strong to open, but it was opened based upon Christ himself, his strength, his trustworthiness, and his holiness. The book of Hebrews says that we can approach the throne of grace through Jesus Christ. Not because of works, we can approach because Jesus met there first. And so this is great news for the Philadelphians, who are described as having little strength. So according to one commentary, they view this little strength phrase as connected not so much to their numbers, how big of a group they were, but the influence they had in their community in politics or public service. This group was just insignificant. I think of being a Calgary Flames fan trying to start a watch party, or a chant at an Oilers home game. You can try, but you're going to hear 3 people, and you might not find them afterwards. Dangerous. Yeah. These believers had a connection to the synagogue. There's a very good chance that they had family connections, Jewish family members who didn't convert, who were still worshiping at the synagogue. They got kicked out. It wasn't uncommon for the Christian church started worshiping in synagogues because the Jews thought they were just another sect kind of thing. Okay, they're choosing this way to interpret a Talmud or some Hebrew text. But then it became apparent that they were saying, no, this Jesus guy that just died, he is God. And so they got kicked out. And so they would have lost their family connection. They would have been likely slandered by the community. We find the synagogue of Satan in another part of our text with another part of the churches, the church of Smyrna. If you remember them, they had to hold on for these 10 days of tribulation. They were faithful. They were being persecuted. Not uncommon for the early church. But for these believers in Philadelphia, there's a chance they had way more connections. The Jewish people were there for much longer. They'd been there before. They were likely converts. And so for these believers putting their faith in Jesus, they would have chosen to abandon their family heritage. They would be following what Jesus calls the new covenant. They'd be following this new covenant head, the person that says, I am the head of this covenant, follow me. Join this new covenant. And though they'd even seen this new covenant head, Jesus shares in the characteristics of the God of the old covenant and says, well, that he seems to be the angel of the Lord that appeared. He's doing these things and making these claims. But before Abraham was, I am. If you read your Old Testament, you'll find the angel of the Lord appearing and saying, the angel of the Lord appears and says, I the Lord, will do this. So you see this weird mix-up of, it's this mystery of the Trinity that we find in the Old Testament where Jesus, pre-incarnate with the Father, you can't quite pinpoint who's doing this. Just read the story of Abraham when he encounters the Lord. I believe, the angel of the Lord is who he encounters there. So these Jewish believers in Philadelphia who converted to Christianity saw, no, this is the incarnation of the Lord. And so they were also being discouraged by their families as a result. They were condemned as blaspheming and abandoning the God who would bring this Messiah to redeem the people of Israel. And these accusations of you're not worshiping the one true God, it's not unique to their time, I'm sure you know. Perhaps you've been challenged in your faith and have heard this accusation that you aren't worshiping the one true God, or you're not a part of the one true church. I'm sure you've heard claims from various Christian cults. You've got cults like Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, You've got Islam, you've got even the progressive movement and the Christian tradition. And they all present different ways to view Jesus. And so when we say that, no, Jesus is God, this is what the church has always taught, we'll find teachings from Mormonism where they say that the church has been corrupted. No denomination is in line with the teaching of the apostles anymore. We need these new apostles. Joseph Smith said that he has this new revelation. And we have Jehovah's Witnesses that say that the church has been corrupted. We have this new translation of the Bible. They've misunderstood scriptures this whole time, and there are so many demonic rituals in what Christianity is now. Like, how can you say Jesus was on a cross when that means Tiamat is a T, it's supposed to be a spike? There's also a claim that Jesus is the archangel Michael, a created being. You don't worship the real Jesus. Jesus is actually. Then you have the teachings of Islam where the Bible has been corrupted. How can you trust this? You blaspheme God if you think he can be killed. Why would you do that? You blaspheme God if you think Jesus is his son. And you've got this progressive movement that says that the church has gotten things wrong all along. God isn't only revealed in the Bible. God is everywhere. Every religious text has God. It's the way to say that there's only one way to the Father misses the point of the Bible. The resurrection even didn't happen. The virgin birth, no. Jesus wasn't sinless. You're worshiping a different God. And each of these belief systems, if you've picked up on it, have one thing in common. Jesus is not the incarnation of the living God. And what the believer in Philadelphia would have been wrestling with was the claims made by the religion that had worshiped the one true God. But now, as Jesus says, their identity has been turned on their head. They say that they are Jews, but they're liars. And so we've talked about this, the Philadelphians and their situation and their family background and such. But let's turn now to this third part, the synagogue of Satan. Now, there's a phrase that says they are Jews, but they are not. It's not orange juice or apple juice. Sorry, I saw that one time. The Jews during the time of Revelation were dealing with mass conversions because of Jesus fulfilling Old Testament texts and just seeing he claimed to be the I am. We knew he was coming. And what we would see in things like Matthew 28, verse 11, a total denial of Jesus' resurrection, where they say we have to tell them that this resurrection that happened, the disciples actually stole his body. You can go take a look at it, Matthew 28, verse 11. There's also an Old Testament connection. As I mentioned, this is very important to this text specifically. I know it's probably a lot to think about, but when you look into this, you'll see Old Testament connection, Old Testament connection. In the Old Testament, there are several texts that indicate that in the end times, the Gentiles who oppressed the nation of Israel would fall down in submission before them and their God. There's specifically Isaiah 60, verse 14. Isaiah writes, "The sons of your oppressors will come bowing before you. All who despise you will bow down at your feet." This was a promise made to the people of Israel. And so now, little did they realize the new covenant would look a little different. They'd have to find that Jesus didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, to bring this new covenant where he would be the head of it, and redemption could be found in him. And so what happened is there's an inheritance that is for the believers of Jesus. And so when we see the sons of oppressors, Israel at the time of Isaiah they were going through exile. They went through two in their history. And so now you've got these Gentiles who are saying, we worship the one true God. This is Jesus Christ. He has come in the flesh. This is the true Messiah. And so they would say, no, he's not. You left our family. You don't get to take part in the benefits of this covenant anymore. You left. But what we find is this irony. We find this irony that you don't participate in the inheritance we have. And then Jesus says, using this Old Testament text, spoken to Israel at first, they will actually bow down before you, your oppressors, these Jews who say they are, but they are not. They will bow at your feet. And I will tell them that I have loved you. Jesus totally flips the script on what they were being told. One commentator elaborates on this Isaiah 60 verse 14 connection here. They say this, the likelihood that Revelation 3 verse 9 refers specifically to Isaiah 60 verse 14 increases when we consider a further allusion to the same verse further on in the sermon to Philadelphia. In 3 verse 12, the positive consequence is that Christ will write on victorious believers in Philadelphia, the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem. This description may reflect the closing words of Isaiah 60 verse 14, where the oppressors of God's people will not only come and bow down before them, but will also call them the city of the Lord, the Zion of the Holy One of Israel. This is ironic because the very same promises made to them Paul writes about these Jewish people. Not this specific community, but Paul writes about the promises made to Israel. In Romans 9, verse 2 to 5, Paul writes this, theirs, that being Israel, is the adoption to sonship. Theirs the divine glory, the covenants, the receiving of the law, the temple worship, and the promises. Theirs are the patriarchs, that is Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. And from them is traced the human ancestry of the Messiah, who is God over all, forever praised. And so now these Gentile believers are receiving the promises of God, and the synagogue of Satan, these old covenant people who have not moved on, that they don't receive that promise. Such broke Paul's heart. If you want to read Romans 9 again, he wishes that he could be accursed himself if his people, the Jewish people, could return and be worshiping the one true God again. While they were being denied in inclusion, this Philadelphian group, the Philadelphian church, are being denied inclusion within the covenant people of God, faith in Jesus is what brings the promises. And everything promised to Israel in the Old Testament. Future glory, likeness of God, to re-enter Eden, this new creation that was coming. Yet we find that these Jews were only Jews outwardly. And yet they were oppressing these Jews inwardly, this Philadelphian church. And so, according to Paul, they'd be disappointed when Christ would come and give his inheritance to these meek Christians in Philadelphia. So this brings us to the fourth part of our text, what I like to title the tribulation. Tribulation, trial, keeping from the hour. This is one of those moments as a preacher when you have to address an issue that involves a lot of bias, a lot of controversy or disagreement within the Christian church. So what I will do here, the most I will do is to say, these are the two positions, and you can do your own study on it or talk to me afterwards if you'd like. So there are two camps on this text where it says, let me just read it here just so we can have it in our mind. I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. So you have one group that views this text as, they're called futurists, like Back to the Future, futurist. They believe that this text was partially for the Philadelphian church, but is something we should read today and be looking out for what's called the rapture. If anyone's heard that word before, on the whole, I shouldn't say on the whole, largely believe that the church will be raptured. They'll actually be grabbed and taken from this earth for this tribulation to occur on the rest of the world. If you're familiar with Left Behind, that's what popularized the view of Darby back in the 1800s. He said there's this rapture. He was what's called a dispensationalist. And so within that camp, they would say, you're getting pulled out of this world, and then tribulation and trial happens to everyone else. And so that's one position, and there's textual basis for that. And if you want to watch a really entertaining series, you watch Left Behind with Kirk Cameron. That's just entertainment. It's literally just entertaining. Don't write a theology book on Kirk Cameron. That'd be interesting, but not very useful for you. And heck, you maybe even remember reading the books. I never read them. Maybe I'll brave them one day. And so that's what's called the futurist view of this text. And the second view, which, full disclosure, this is where I'm at, I think that this was an hour of trial coming on the whole world that would be fulfilled in their lifetime. When we read the book of Revelation, it's important to understand that the Bible was written for us, but it was not written to us. What I mean by that is the original audience was not me. I'm not a Philadelphian believer from AD 60 or whatever. And so when we read the Bible anywhere, we have to think, what were the people thinking back then? Where were they at? How would they have read this? And I can tell you, they weren't thinking of me when they heard, I'm going to keep you from this hour of tribulation. Or the Apostle John, writing the book of Revelation, was not thinking of me specifically. Wasn't thinking of us specifically. Was thinking of the church. And so this view, this hour of trial coming and being removed, it's an event that would have happened within the lifetime of the original audience. And somehow this trial would impact the Roman world. They didn't have the idea of hemispheres. They had, maybe the capital of Rome and surrounding areas. They didn't have a globe to spin around and kind of look at, like, I want to go to Mexico this year. They didn't have anything like that. Their view of the world was very limited. And what I think this trial is connected to is likely the fall of the temple in 70 AD, where Jesus gave a prophecy that to these Jewish people in the book of Matthew, that not one stone will be left on top of another, as well as flee, for you not know the hour. You don't know the hour. Be ready to leave. Get out of here, because there's going to be the Assyrians who would come in and destroy Rome. That was what happened in the timeline of the world. So those are the two positions. One of them is mine that I hold to. Again, we can pleasantly disagree. Feel free to talk to me about it. I love end time stuff, and it's just fun. But in this context, the Philadelphian church would hear, I'll keep you from this trial, and whether you hold one view or the other, this is what this means. No matter the strength or influence you have in your church, with your church, your weakness will not hinder you from being kept from trial by Christ. That's what's important to take from this, that Jesus says, I will keep you. I will hold you. This is actually the same word Jesus uses in his high priestly prayer. Father, keep them as you have kept me. It's the same Greek word. And so for this Philadelphian church, they're hearing, we're weak, we barely hold on, we're holding on for dear life. We're being slandered, we're being persecuted by our family. The synagogue is giving us just a run for our money. And Jesus says, I know you have little strength, yet I know you've kept my name. You've never denied me. I will keep you in this hour of trial that's coming on the world. It's a wonderful promise for Philadelphian church. And this promise isn't empty, as it takes us into the fifth part of our text, this temple. I just want us to read, it's a long list. Jesus says, I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have so that no one will take your crown. Which starts this. The one who is victorious, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will they leave it. I will write on them the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God. And I will also write on them my new name. This crown is not the blingy Queen Elizabeth kind of crown. It's not for royalty. There's two kinds of crowns spoken of in Revelation. One of them is this golden crown that you put on a king. But primarily, you will find this crown in the New Testament as the victory wreath. As we've passed Reformation Day or Halloween, we can now start hanging our Christmas wreaths on our doors. Just think of that, but on a much smaller size, made with olive branches, and it was used for athletic games. If you won a race, you'd get this crown. If you won this grappling match, you'd get this crown. It was a reward for persevering in whichever event you had and overcoming. This is the kind of crown that's being talked about here, a crown that you strive towards earning and gaining, which ironically will be laid down at Jesus' feet anyways. And there are only two times in these sermons in Revelation, in chapter 2 to 3, where crowns are even mentioned for these churches. First, Smyrna. That's in chapter 2. That's the second sermon after Ephesus. And then this time. Both of these churches didn't have a lot going for them. They didn't have a huge reputation in the culture around them. They weren't known necessarily for their love. They weren't known for their intellect. They didn't have anything that really stood out for them, except that they were faithful to Jesus Christ. And it's really beautiful because you start out with Ephesus, where they knew stuff and they were discerning, and then we got Laodicea next time I'm out here, which is they were actually just a useless church. And then it kind of works in a chiasm. I'm nerding out a little bit, so I'll let you know when you can start listening again if you're bored. You've got these two extreme churches, then you've got these two persecuted churches. And it kind of works its way in, and then, yeah, it kind of works the way down. It looks cool. You can start listening again. Resume listening. So the church of Smyrna was called to be faithful even to the point of death, so that they would receive the victor's crown. And now we find the church of Philadelphia having this crown and being told to hold on to it. Have you ever gone through a tough time and are just told, hold on, something good's coming? Does it drive you crazy like it drives me crazy? Thanks. Yeah, I'll just hold on. This sucks. Have some empathy, you know. Have you ever been told to hold on to something? Think about this Philadelphian church who has just been, Jesus knows, they don't have a lot of strength. So to put all their energy into holding on, they would think, I don't have much to offer. What do you mean hold on? Like, I'll do it, but hold on? I'm barely floating above water here. So this would be a task that wouldn't be without difficulty. And holding on to hope is never a feat for the faint of heart. Holding on while your whole world is falling apart. Holding on while your family is about to go nuclear. Holding on while your family now accuses you of slander, hate, for even not being saved because you chose to come to Evergreen CRC today instead of their church. Or just a church in general. You came here, you're a bigot. Holding on while you experience suffering or see suffering around you. It can feel impossible. And a good question perhaps to ask yourself is, what are you holding on for? The Philadelphian church was certainly asking, okay, hold on for what? Hold on to this crown because why? Why would I do that? What benefit is there for me to hold on? This is terrible. This letter has found me after the worst week. I was able to get the kids into the worship service today. What am I holding on for would have been a question. It's then Jesus gives the promise of the temple and being engraved in the kingdom of God. And so you'll become pillars in the temple. I will write my name on you. You'll receive a new name. You will have a name in the kingdom of God. Never again will they leave it. Never again will they leave this people that know the history of Israel, exiled twice out of God's presence. That's kind of how they viewed it. To be in tribulation, be away from God. That's what that was. And what Jesus says, no, I will make you a pillar. And it sounds like, this giant, it's a pillar. Those things they hold up bridges, they held up temples, they were in castles. And that's the right way to think about it. But there's an additional Old Testament detail here, where in a temple, if you had a pillar, in the Old Testament, you say, I will write God says, I will place my name there. I will engrave my name in my temple, and I will dwell there. So for Jesus to say, you will be pillars, and I will write my name right there. This temple's not going anywhere. You are not going to get kicked out. You're not going to get knocked over. You might have little strength and little to offer, but I will give you a place in my temple that is so significant that without you, it would all fall apart. You who have little strength, you're going to hold up a temple. You're going to play a role in the kingdom of God that these people who say they're Jews but are not, these liars who bow at your feet because you are such an integral part of the kingdom. And to a city, one commentator writes, to a city that had experienced devastating earthquakes because of this, they were on a tectonic plate, this caused people to flee into the countryside and establish temporary dwellings, not very prone to natural disasters, which I'm sure is familiar. in the history of Fort McMurray, you've had more than one. Being told you will not have to leave because of that, ever. Imagine being promised permanence in God's kingdom when you have nothing to offer. You have a couple breaths. Being told you will never leave. This new covenant is pretty great. For a Philadelphian who was told you will receive none of these promises of God, you are worshiping the false one. To hear that all the time, and then hear Jesus say, "Nope, you are an integral part of this kingdom. You receive this citizenship." This is another Old Testament allusion or fulfillment. This name that is going to be given to them is an inheritance to the people of God. And now these Gentile Christians and these Jewish converts are receiving this name from the one who is holy, the Holy One of Israel, and the one who is true and trustworthy. And the one who opens the door not because we have any strength to offer, not by works, but by faith. These weak believers would inherit the earth. They would inherit this name in God's kingdom. They would receive what is imperishable. See, even in their weakness, their powerlessness, and seeming insignificance, this did not deter the Lord Jesus Christ from promising that they would be strong supports in the kingdom of God, integral to this coming kingdom. They'd be part of this new temple in the New Jerusalem, where they would be part of the unmitigated presence of God, as prophesied in Ezekiel 48. These believers, unlike the people of Israel, would never experience exile again. They would no longer be identified as separated from God or banned from the garden. But instead, Christ, the true and trustworthy one who holds the key to God's presence, who holds the door open that none can shut, gives a promise of an inherited kingdom, eternal kingdom that would never be lost, the New Jerusalem, new creation. That's why that crown matters. It is worth straining towards because, first of all, there's an end to the suffering. There's an end to separation and brokenness. There's an end to difficulty. There's an end to loneliness. There's an end to separation from God. A separation that seemed permanent at one time. A separation that seemed permanent where the veil was there in the temple. You couldn't go in there more than once a year, and it couldn't even be you. You couldn't be before the living God unless you were the high priest. Unless you held that privileged key to get into, if you let me use that kind of language, unless you held that key in the permission slip to see God that one time a year, you couldn't enter. If you're a Gentile not Philippian, that's a different city. If you're a Gentile Philadelphian, you'd be allowed into the foyer of the temple. But now they're being told you'll be pillars. You'll be pillars in the temple of God. There's literally no separation. Okay. Just want to invite Lisa up as I close here. And so we've gone through this church of Philadelphia. We find that Jesus gives this assurance to these believers. And this assurance to these believers who are told, you're not worshiping the true God. Are you really a believer? Are you worshiping in truth? Do you have the scriptures? You worship this Jesus guy. He's not it. They're in this context where it's a rough time, just to put it lightly. This Philadelphian church has been given this assurance because of who Jesus is. He is the Holy One. He is the true and trustworthy one. He is the one who can open the door to the weak and does so. He is the one that has a promised inheritance for any who would turn to him. For anyone who would say, I want to follow Jesus. I want to submit my life to him. Follow him with everything I've got. I don't have a lot, but I want to give him everything. The reality is he's already opened the door. You don't have to open anything. One thing to notice after going through this sermon, this church didn't have all the bells and whistles. It didn't have a huge reputation outside of its four walls. It didn't have all the programs. They didn't have academic rigor and a real understanding of the truth like the Ephesians. They didn't have a reputation of love necessarily like Thyatira. They didn't have martyrs like Antipas in Pergamum who died for his faith. All this church had, the one characteristic they had that Jesus pointed out, that he knew them for, was their weakness. And that's not a bad thing. Because every single promise made by Jesus, every quality mentioned, was spoken to communicate this one central truth. It's not the strong or impressive that are granted access to the kingdom of God, but those who Christ opens the door to. And today, he opens that same door to us, to you. We talked about that faith audit at the beginning here. Have you been accused of not worshiping the true God, or you're not truly worshiping him? Has your conscience accused you? I know it's done that for me in the past. Like when I was woken up in the middle of the night and my daughter had a poopy diaper. It happens. I'm just kidding. It's beautiful. Maybe you had a faith transition and have experienced slander, abuse, or rejection from your family, whether recently or long ago, because you chose Jesus. The sermon to Philadelphia shows us that in worshiping Jesus, we are worshiping the one true God. And only in him can we find assurance. And so whatever weakness that you possess, whatever frailty your faith has to offer, whatever social standing you have or don't have in your community, all that Christ says to you is this: come, enter, become a part of my body. Hold on to this crown that you already have. He's coming soon to make us a part of this kingdom as an immovable pillar, to receive an inheritance where only the meek are eligible, and a resurrection where Christ's power is truly made perfect in weakness. And if you feel you're too weak to enter the kingdom, place your trust in Christ for this entry ticket. Not because of your works, because you feel like you have something to offer, but because of Christ's finished work on the cross and his invitation to you.